their schedules work, and thank you for staff. It's, you know, after 5 o'clock on Friday, so thank you so much for helping to accommodate this. Let's start off with a roll call.
Councilmember Penros?
Here.
Councilmember Rohrbeck?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
Here.
Mayor Eisen?
Here.
You have a quorum.
And I just want to say that this was very short notice and very quick turnaround. And I'm not sure if Debbie Ruddock will be able to make it. And we just appreciate the fact she let us know beforehand. So I just want to make that very open and clear. All right, let's start our special session on the City Council meeting. Bob, do you want to kick it off?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'll be happy to.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public, yeah, we do apologize for scheduling this special meeting on a Friday night. It's been a crazy time and obviously a kind of a crazy week, but we did think it was the prudent thing to do given the circumstances. So I will jump right into the reason we decided to schedule a special meeting and the action that is before the council tonight. So what is before you is three actions all rolled up into one resolution. So when you get to that point, Catherine can certainly advise on how to make the motion, but it's one resolution, three actions contained in there. So the three actions are to ratify a declaration of an emergency. Action number 2 is to ratify an executive order that I made on August 20th, and that was to close the beaches between August 21st and August 24th. So that has already came and gone, so that's pretty straightforward that the council would be concurring that that was done. And then the third action, as part of that resolution, would be to ratify an executive order that I adopted on August 26th to likewise close the beaches this weekend, August 29th through the 31st. What we have for the council, and this gets to why we're scheduling the special meeting tonight, is we actually have two resolutions. One does those first two actions for sure. We recommend the declaration of the emergency. We recommend ratifying the first order. But then there's two resolutions, one to ratify the order for this weekend, but we have an alternative resolution should the council decide not to ratify the order that I took. In other words, it would rescind the order I took. And the reason that's why we're having the special meeting with things changing so fast on the CZU fire. It was such a dynamic week in terms of the decision-making and the reasons that the executive order was done for the previous weekend and everything that changed between that weekend and this weekend coming up, that we felt we should not wait until your Tuesday regular meeting. That's clearly after the weekend. And I wanted to give the council the opportunity and the public, of which we have some members here, to speak to this. And so again, given that the condition of the fire was changing rapidly, it just seemed like the opportunity to be there for the council to make that decision. I'll just quickly go through a little bit that's in the staff report, and then Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you to take public comment and deliberate the subject at hand. But as I just went through the recommendation, but I want to just clarify a few points on page 3 of the staff report. So the first action, declaring an emergency, on page 3, there's 4 bullet points that are the factors behind why we're making that recommendation. And as you can see, even though the fire is almost out, we think it's important that the council do this. The fire, bullet point 1, forced the evacuation of a great number of residents, and a lot of those people evacuated into Half Moon Bay. So even though the fire was not in Half Moon Bay, we were obviously affected by the fire. People that had to evacuate came to Half Moon Bay. There were road closures south of Half Moon Bay that had an impact. And of course, one of the most important things that was done was an evacuation center was set up at the high school to provide services, food, water, hotel vouchers for evacuees. So we were involved, we were in a support role. And so the primary purpose at this point for adopting the declaration of emergency is so that we can be in the best position possible to make sure all the costs that we incurred are reimbursed by FEMA. That's the way that costs are reimbursed. And again, we were in a support role, but we have incurred costs. We had staff time, miscellaneous costs. We purchased some goods that were necessary. So they'll add up. It won't be a lot, but we felt that that was just a good move. And then on the second act, the two other actions, the beach closures, the one that's already happened and the one that's set for this weekend. There's also some bullet points at the bottom of page 3 that are the factors behind why I did that. I think the first bullet point is clearly the most important. The factor for the first one for last weekend and the thinking that I went through for the second one are really the same. The purpose was to keep people off the roads, keep the roads as free as possible for emergency responders and evacuees. That was really foremost in my mind in making that decision to do that. And like I said, this week has been very dynamic. Things have changed. And so we thought a special meeting was in order for the council to consider that. And then finally, there's a second item on your agenda that relates. So I'll just introduce it now, but you can take them separately. So the next item is just for direction only since we're here. We were planning to do this next Tuesday, but we felt we'd get a jump on it now. And that is to also get direction from the council on Labor Day weekend, the weekend after this coming weekend, and thoughts from the council on whether we should proceed with closing the beaches. That discussion might be a different discussion depending on progress towards putting out the fire. We assume, if that only gets better, the original thinking in discussions that we previously had about Labor Day pre-fire was that July 4th was successful, and the reasoning behind that closure had to do with the pandemic. And so that's back on the table for consideration by the council, more so for the pandemic than for the reasons behind closures for the fire. So that concludes my report. I'll turn it back over to you for the item.
First of all, let me what a couple of 10 days, whatever it's been. It has been a whirlwind of information and lots of conversations back and forth. And I just really appreciate your flexibility, the amount of time staff's put into all this, and the amount of conversations that have been held to get to this time and place, and all the moving parts associated, because we're really, what we're really talking about here is always keeping our residents safe, but also balancing the need for business and recreation for others. So there's just so many things at play here. I just appreciate what you've done, in particular, Bob, and staff as well. So just want to thank you for that before we bring it back for everybody else. And then I'm going to go open it up for public comment, and then we can bring it back. And when we bring it back, I'd like to kind of parse it out, if possible, where we talk about this weekend is one thing, next weekend is yet another, and the declaration is its own piece. And we just kind of do one at a time, maybe, and just go around the room. If you guys think that's the best way to do it, we can discuss that quickly as we're listening to public comment of what you all think would be the best way to go about it. So with that.
And so for any of our attendees, if you'd like to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature. If you open your participant list on your Zoom app, it would be in the right-hand corner, or you can right-click on your name. And as a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Brent Turner, go ahead.
Hello, City Council. Good evening. I just wanted to make a few points. First of all, when we talk about balancing the health and safety of the citizens versus the business interests and the need for recreation, I think that's almost a red herring. I think business interests and the health and safety of the people are one and the same, actually. And so protecting the people has an unusual effect here of actually getting us out of this situation, and that allows the businesses to open. So I think there's been a false narrative there where those two situations are not aligned. And the need for recreation, I think, is a red herring as well. I obviously, we always want the beaches for the people, but not in the midst of a pandemic and not to their own health and safety detriment. So, I mean, these are obvious points, but I just wanted to highlight them again. We've been hearing that Pacifica has the ability for the mayor and the council to make emergency decisions. And so the people would like that to be brought forward to see if there's a way to create that circumstance for the council and the mayor. Also, we wanted to just bring up the fact that this, I think we had at one point a 10-mile travel restriction, which may alleviate some of the concerns around the beaches, because what we're really trying to eliminate, as the city manager mentioned earlier, is that influx of people coming in and then leaving and taking, cross-infecting and then leaving, taking virus spread back to their own communities. And that interaction, that travel is really more important than the beaches per se. The beaches, I think, are used as part of the messaging to tell people they really should be staying in place and not commingling with other people in public spaces. That's about it. We've seen some problems with the messaging being lacking consistency. The media really isn't sufficient right now. We haven't seen the media blitz that we've seen previous. And then obviously the lack of enforcement, the poor signage. These are factors that will make for a less than a successful campaign. So if we really want to do this and try to keep the people out, I think the issue is, again, let's not bring them here and then manage them. Let's do that hard messaging where they're staying away while we're going through this pandemic. And in closing, I just want to say, I hope the pandemic is getting better, but I'm not sure that it is. And I don't think the experts have their arms around it yet. So we're well served to really err on the side of caution and keep the health and safety of the citizens paramount. The people deserve that protection, and I appreciate the attention you're giving this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Good comments. Appreciate them.
I don't have any other hands raised here.
Okay.
Oh, I do have one. Justin, go ahead. Stockman.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for giving me a chance to speak. I just want to really forcefully dissent from the previous comment. I understand the need to protect health and safety. I understand the concern. I think I see two major problems. One is we are now on the third iteration of a reason to close our beaches. We are a community that is wider than the coast side. We are a society that's interdependent on each other. And increasingly, this looks like a series of reasons to exclude our friends, our families, our neighbors from our community. It is an example of us having what we want and being happy with that, and giving the appearance of excluding others. I think we need to think very carefully about how we're using this wildfire as an example. So if there had been consistent messaging that due to COVID, it was necessary to keep beaches closed, I think that would have come from public health. And to my knowledge, there's no direction to that. Mixing in this wildfire issue, again, there are experts in that field. There are people that are capable of closing roads, closing communities as necessary. To my knowledge, they have not asked for that. There is a substantial difference between an incident management team asking people to avoid an area and asking that beaches be closed. It is not CAL FIRE. It is not the CZU Lightning Complex. It is not an incident management team that's asked you to close the beaches. It is a decision that the city is making. So I just want to urge caution. I want to really urge that we make sure we're making decisions based on verifiable information from experts, and it's not public pressure, because the reality is, from multiple sources, the public interest in keeping beaches restricted goes way beyond COVID. It goes way beyond these fires, and it's not the right thing to do at the end of the day. And as I asked all of you in an email earlier today, all I'm asking is use your heads, use your hearts, and make the right decision in this situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
We have two more speakers. Next is Roberta Gelt. Roberta, go ahead.
She's on mute.
I'm trying to unmute her. Roberta, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I just did that. Okay, thank you. I sent you all an email, except Robert. I don't have your email address, so I apologize about my feelings about that. But I just want to reiterate that I disagree with Justin. I don't think it's just because we're all being selfish with our beaches and our town. I really believe that this is a safety issue, especially because of the fires. I sit here and imagine what it would be like if the entire coast side had to evacuate. It would be a nightmare on the roads if there's enough traffic already, but inviting or allowing people from over the hill or north of us to come to our town as well, that adds more traffic and prevents a safe and quick evacuation if needed. I don't know what the status is of the fires right now, but it could change at any minute with the wind. So that really concerns me. The other thing is if you do decide to basically close the coast side, close the beaches, is the enforcement of that. They were closed last weekend, but I went to my closest beach to me, which is on Miramontes Avenue, on the way to the Ritz. And there were barriers up to make sure that nobody drove into the parking lot, but there were 6 cars in the parking lot and more people coming to move the barriers and come in and park. So I personally asked them to leave because the beaches were closed. So I also haven't heard from anyone else that there's anyone enforcing this. And I think, Jessica, you told me today that there was going to be staff at each of the parking lots from now on. It seems to me that there might be some way to close or to prevent people from coming over the hill before they come here. So at the beginning of 92 and in Pacifica before they drive over in Devil's Slide, have some kind of management there where they're asked to turn around and go home before they're in our town. So those are my comments. And it does scare me that we add thousands more people to our town when we're trying to evacuate. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Roberta. And Bob, I'm not sure if we were able to get out the message about enforcement. Do you want to quickly just kind of go over how we were doing last weekend, just so it's clear to everybody?
Sure. No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad the speaker brought that up. I think that is a good point to at least clarify what we tried to do and didn't try to do and did well and didn't do very well last weekend, because I've seen some comments and chatter about it as well. So the decision was made, as I indicated, for the reason I indicated. Middle of the fire, people were being evacuated. First responders needed to do their job, and that was the focus, to keep people off the roads. And so that was the thought behind it. Unfortunately, when we made that decision, we knew we did not have the resources to do enforcement like we did on the 4th of July. The sheriff was clear. They had no one available to do it. All deputies were busy on the fire, and they just did not have the people. The most effective tool on July 4th weekend was, they had deputies on their Polaris down on the beach, and they could easily clear people by driving up and down the beach, and they just did not have the personnel to do it. The second thing that was effective on July 4th was we had city staff at a couple key access points to Poplar telling people the beaches were closed, and that's obviously more effective than a sign. And we also did not have the staff ready and available to do that weekend. So that's how it went. We agreed at that point that it was about deterrence. It was about keeping people off the road to the best of our ability. And the deterrence was certainly getting the message out through the media, through social media. Don't come in the first place. If they came anyway, well, then they already clogged up the roads. And so with that, we also made the decision to go ahead and keep the parking lot at Poplar Beach open. So for the 4th of July, the parking lot was closed. We had the sheriff deputies enforcing, we had city staff out there, and that was a better way to enforce. We had a barrier, we closed the coastal trail, it was effective. But with the lack of enforcement, our logic was if they made it this far, and they wanted to ride on the coastal trail, that was still legal. And so if they wanted to park in the parking lot and we obviously were not encouraging them to walk by a sign that says beach is closed, but obviously people did that. But once they were here, they would have parked in the neighborhoods anyway for free and done the same thing. So that was the logic. Certainly people can debate the decisions we made, but given the circumstances, that was the approach that was used last weekend.
And just real quick, kind of softball question, but what were the police doing?
Yeah, so they were initially busy with evacuation. The message I was getting from Saul was evacuation and being ready for evacuation. So with an emergency and the way police work in an emergency, you have to have them ready too. So they may not be doing anything, but they're ready to evacuate, and being on a Polaris on the beach is not in a position to be ready to respond to an emergency. So they were busy. And then as the week progressed, I've heard more and more, both from the news and also from our captain, Saul, that they've been busy with looters and people who have been violating the evacuation zones. So, and then of course, all their normal business of keeping the city and the coast side safe from anything else that might go on. But we've heard lots of stories of people violating the evacuation zones and actually breaking into homes.
Yeah, good answers. Thank you for all that, Bob.
Yeah. Hey, Adam,
go on, please.
Just to add to Bob's differentiating between July 4th. On July 4th, as we remember, we also had at the last minute, the state backed us up and closed down all their beaches. So, we were able to say this substantial portion of the coast was going to be closed down, and the news media amplified that message. So it also, was a huge. And remember, Friday, the first day, people came out and said, are they really, are they for real? And they learned that it was. And then by Saturday and Sunday, it was almost desolate. So we had those advantages as well, which we did not have this past weekend, where we only closed down Poplar and
Surfers.
Sorry, Surfers and Poplar.
If you could call it closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And again, but without the enforcement. So without the state supporting us and without enforcement, and did lessen, I think, to some extent, the amount of people coming down and the traffic, as most of us observed. So yeah. So now we're in a new situation where people are. The evacuation orders have been rescinded, mostly to south of us. So I assume there would be less looters. And then there's this question now of how, and again, we're separating the COVID from the emergency piece with fires. At least I am in my mind. They're two separate factors. When they combined all at once, that's almost overwhelming. But now, you know, people are having different opinions about, we're back to the situation where we're going to probably be more focused on COVID, I imagine, than keeping the roads as clear as we needed to a week ago, as far as I can read things. So, but I'd be interested in other opinions on that. So,
yeah, so I go along with it because the goal was to amplify the bigger message by the emergency service folks. We went into it with our eyes wide open regarding enforcement, but we felt that, you know, given the governor's office, you know, inability or disinterest in closing the roads, we felt we could at least amplify the message. And I think it worked to some extent. Like one of the days I know was still super busy. So that said, I'd like us to finish listening to the public. I think there's a couple more speakers.
Yeah, two more speakers. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks. Kyle Wilhelms, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to second the previous point that it appears that we're making decisions here without at least the full support or direction from experts in the field, both in the area of the wildfire concern and the COVID concern. It feels like we're going alone to shut our resource down amid the larger, to the larger community and other communities that surround us, keep their resources open to Half Moon Bay. So it does seem strange to me that we're so quick to close our beaches as of late. The other concern I have is we don't have, as it appears to me, the infrastructure to protect all of our beaches. And so we appear to be embarking on some kind of a plan to close some beaches, which will redirect people to other beaches, which many of which are less capable to support crowds, which I think is ultimately worse for everyone in the long run. I think if we can't do this in a holistic fashion, we would be better served as a community not to do it at all. The people are going to come regardless. And if we're not capable of funneling the traffic appropriately, closing parking lots that are truly a resource to the community because they effectively manage tourist traffic, just redistributes tourist traffic in adverse ways. And the final point I want to make is I was pleased with what everyone on the council did last weekend. I think the goal, as I understood it, was to avoid clogging up the roads and not necessarily to close the beaches, just commenting on your previous discussion. And I think you all achieved that quite well. I think there's a danger to do it again this weekend. I could be mistaken, but I don't know that you've done the same media blitz that you did before. And I think you're in a position where you did an effective media blitz, you got what you needed. But when everyone, those that did came, found low enforcement, and the more you do that, the less effective it's going to be next time when you truly need it. And I think doing it this weekend would be a mistake for that reason. So in all those, I just wanted to make the point that we should not close the beaches this weekend because I don't think we're well equipped to support it. I don't think it's well advised by other experts in the field, and I think it would be detrimental to long-term needs of needing to do so in the future when it's more important.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. Good comments.
Next we have Juliet. Juliet, go ahead. Juliet?
Still.
Okay, done. All right, bring it back to council then. Let's discuss. Do you guys are you guys interested in breaking it up into different pieces, or do you want to just do it all at once in your discussion? Debbie, please. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'd like to start with the COVID discussion. The more I'm reading, the more I'm persuaded that outdoor recreation is not the highest risk activity.
Exactly.
We now know, after various scientific articles and media coverage, that the real threats are family gatherings primarily. You know, weddings, funerals, bars, you know, younger people going out to bars and socializing, people eating in restaurants. Outdoor recreation right now is considered a relatively low risk. And it's easy to protect yourself in those situations by social distancing, wearing masks, staying in your house. So I don't think the COVID argument is very strong. And the other thing is, and this impacts the beaches in general, is we're not just a beach city with some beaches that people like to come to. Our entire city is located in the coastal zone. Our entire city is subject to the Coastal Act. And the primary driver of the Coastal Act is maximizing public access to the coast. So we do have a balancing act here. And we have various parts of our general plan and our land use plan that help us focus on these issues. So I'm very reluctant to make decisions that impact access in a negative way. Certainly not for COVID anymore, because I don't feel that's a strong argument. As for wildfires and the roads, I agree with Justin Stockman that the decisions to close roads actually rest with the California Highway Patrol, and usually the governor's office in combination with the county and the sheriff. So we have very little leverage there. And we can holler and scream, and we did last weekend, you know, to no avail. So I don't think the current state of the wildfires and evacuation routes and things is a strong argument. And there's very little we can do there anyway. So I think where I'm starting to come down after wrapping my mind around all these pieces is that we have to manage, you know, what we can. And as individuals, we're responsible for reducing our own risk. And I'm not in favor of closing the beaches this weekend. I am in favor, and I've reiterated this at many meetings in a row, that we need beefed up plans to deal with beach access, both in the short term and the long term. I know we're working on it, but I think we have to, you know, demonstrate some progress on it. I would ask right now, like, what is the capacity of the sheriff's office this weekend to deal better with beach issues now that there's less evacuation issues and less looting issues, et cetera? Do we know from Saul whether there's more capacity to deal with the influx of visitors this weekend as opposed to last weekend? For the city manager?
Bob, I think that's a question for you.
Councilmember Ruddick. I have not had a chance to talk to Saul today, but you make a good point, and I'm making a note that I will talk to him as soon as the meeting's over. The last time again, fast moving week, the last time I spoke to him, which was maybe 36 hours ago, his indication was they still didn't have the resources. But you're quite right, things have changed a lot, and I will check in with him for this weekend.
So my recommendation would be to stay open this weekend, but, you know, I think we have to demonstrate some progress on wrapping our arms around what I think is actually a long-term trend, and that is increased visitor presence on our beaches and in our town. People are taking more day trips. You know, summers are getting hotter in some places, not necessarily in Half Moon Bay. But I think long-term, we're just going to see more and more people coming. I don't think that's going to, you know, subside whatsoever. So I think a big part of our effort as a city, is a beach city, and a beach city in the coastal zone is we have to find ways to not just, not impede public access, but we have to enhance it both for visitors and for the public who lives here and our businesses. So we're a beach community. We got to deal with those issues. We can't just, it's a beach over there and we go there and we don't have to worry about it. We're a regular city. That's just not the case. So again, I would just encourage us all to move forward in that direction, is mitigating the impacts of the visitor experience, enhancing it for residents and visitors. We have to go in that direction. As for next weekend, it could be a big weekend. It's Labor Day. People are going to be wanting to get out after being cooped up and staying home because of the fires, not just COVID. But again, I'd rather see us manage it, I think, than shutting down. I don't know how we do that on relatively short notice. It's next weekend, but I'd like to hear from my fellow council members on that.
All right. Who's up next?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you say, Debbie, but I come back to the issue that we do not have the resources to manage. It would be lovely if we did, and I think we should be working toward that, no question, but I don't think we have them right now. I don't know, is Highway 84 open yet?
I'll do the confirmation. I believe it is.
84 is completely open. And what about 35?
I believe it is too.
That's also open. Okay, so the road situation isn't quite as dire as it was. We haven't heard anything about them opening Highway 1 South. I feel like the fire is probably under control to the point where I am not as concerned as I was 2 days ago about the fire and about evacuation for folks here. So God forbid we should have another lightning storm or something, another fire starting, in which case, I'll have been very, very wrong. But
I'd like to respond to that if I could, Deborah, when you're finished.
Pardon me?
I'd like to respond to that when you're done.
Yeah, sure. I guess the whole thing about enforcement is an issue that we haven't really looked at, because if we are going to talk about more enforcement, we're talking about putting a lot of money where our mouths are. It's not going to be a cheap thing, and that doesn't mean I disagree with doing it, but it's something we are going to have to really seriously consider. It's not a matter of hiring 1 or 2 more policemen. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's going to be a bigger issue than that. I also think that people do have the right, and just talking from a point of view of health and mental health and physical health, that people have a right to use our beaches, not just the state beaches, but our beaches as well. They belong to them as well as to us. And if I'm afraid personally that they're not going to be socially distancing or wearing masks, I can choose to stay home. I haven't actually seen too many people transgressing. On the coastal trail, probably 80% of people are good about wearing masks. Everybody's socially distanced. So I guess that's all I have to say right now.
Very good. Debbie?
Just quick. So the Coastal Act doesn't recognize the issue of, do you have the resources to support coastal access? That's not a choice. You know, if it were, a lot of coastal cities would have, you know, opted out by now, but you can't do that. So totally understand your point that, you know, we don't have sufficient resources. But what it takes is coalition building with other coastal cities, and Harvey's on the California League of Cities Coastal Issues Group, where he might, you know, raise these sorts of issues. Certainly it's a, you know, it's a state mandate, therefore there should be state funding, you know, behind it. But, you know, I think everybody's a little bit, you know, behind the curve because of everything that's happened in the last 6 months, right? So the Coastal Commission didn't, you know, anticipate this. The Coastal Act doesn't anticipate this. We know what the state's doing, and they're, you know, doing adaptive management, you know, every day. So it's going to require us to identify needs, you know, do what we can with what we have, identify what we need to do a better job of it. And we have to work that. And we have to build coalitions with other cities. I think, to Deborah's point about the roads, you know, have we had a discussion with CHP and the sheriff about what are the policies for closing the roads? What are the triggers for closing the roads? What are we going to do if there's a fire closer to Highway 92, further north? What's the policy for closing the roads? We need to know what that is. Maybe have a voice in, you know, influencing modifications to that might be needed given the increased visitation and the mega drought and the wildfires and all that sort of stuff. So it's really, you know, it's huge, and we're only at the early stages of wrapping our arms around it, forced by COVID and wildfires. But you know, that's clearly the direction that we have to go in to keep our place livable. That's not going to satisfy a lot of people, you know what I'm saying, like Brent Turner and others, but I think we have to be cognizant of what we can do and what we can't do in the context in which we operate as a coastal zone city. And, you know, I think we can get further along the curve by having more of these discussions more frequently, and opening it up to, you know, public input. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a while, but we have to go in that direction. And yeah, I don't have any, you know, simple answers. So.
Very good. Harvey, would you like to weigh in on this issue?
Sure.
Yeah.
In the short term, I believe that it would be foolish for us to close our beaches unless the state and the county also closed their beaches. I agree with the speaker who said that that would actually probably increase the incidence of COVID if we kind of force people to congregate at the state or county beaches. So I'm not in favor of closing our beaches unless the state and county went along with us at the same time. And that certainly goes for Labor Day too. That's my point. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Vice Mayor, Robert Brownstone?
Yeah, I'm just going to make a couple of quick observations. Then, Adam, I'd like to hear from you, but then I might come back at it, because I know at the beginning of the week, right, we instructed staff to close the beach Poplar this weekend, right? And I know you supported that. And then you also supported working on closing things down for Labor Day. So I want to kind of hear where you are. But one observation I'll make first.
Wait a second. I'd like to put my own words in my own mouth, please.
Yeah.
You can speak for yourself, but please don't put words in my mouth. I find that offensive.
Yeah, I don't think I put words in your mouth, but that's fine. So I think one of the triggering points was our Memorial Day weekend, where we had the state closed all their parking lots, but they left the beaches open. And that kind of left us in a tough spot. And then we had tons of traffic going into the streets. It was after the first time since all the shelter in places things were lifted, and the 10-mile limits and the 5-mile limits that Brent Turner referred to earlier. So that all came together in one moment, and tons of people came out here, and with all kinds of behavior, some of it in excess, and people are dumping garbage, and the bathrooms were closed also, a lot of the bathrooms, so it made for a real bad situation. And then unfortunately, that seemed to sort of became like a barometer of everything that could go wrong, even when the state did decide to, on July 4th, closed everything, parking lots and beaches. So now we're in a situation that's different, where we keep everything open, where the bathrooms are open, where the parking lots would be open, where all the beaches would be open. And if we do close one beach, like Poplar, which is probably half of the entire coast side of beaches here, you create a density issue, as Debbie reiterated what the other speaker said. You create a density issue for all the remaining beaches. So that's the situation we're in right now. So yeah, I just wanted to mention those points in terms of where we started out with our triggering point that created all the panic about people coming over. I don't think we're in that same situation, and we wouldn't be. And I think we're out of the fire issue. So each one is a separate triggering issue. And that's what I see before us now. Do we have all those triggers in place, or enough mitigated or ameliorated to feel okay about opening the beach? And by the way, Debbie, to your point, yeah, and every time we've closed everything, it's been, you could say it's a violation of the Coastal Act, right? Whatever actions we took, you could argue that. So, I mean, I agree with you. We have to have better, long-term planning on what those definitive triggers are. But right now we've sort of been shocked by all these triggers, and we're still in reactive mode versus planning mode. And I agree, we have to be in a better planning mode.
To that, I would say, I just want to add that I think, the city manager has made the right calls. And he's been very thoughtful about the rationale for doing things. None of us have moved as fast as many people in the community would have liked us to, but I think being thoughtful about it and evaluating choices, as Bob did, was really good. And the rest of our staff, I just want people to know, have been working really hard on these issues. The city manager, the deputy city manager, the city clerk and our communication staff, public works staff, our staff has been, working extremely hard, and I think extremely well to support, the policy of the city council. I don't fault our staff at all. And in fact, I praise our staff for the patience you've had and the flexibility to, move along with us. And I know sometimes it seems like we're jerking around and situations change and we're rethinking what we're doing. So I want to thank staff for that. And I want the public to know, everything that staff has been going through and doing well. So I don't want to leave this meeting without having that said.
Very good. And real quick, back to Bob, to Robert. So Robert, I'm just just so we can get to the decision points of what we're actually saying here. Did you support closing last weekend? Do you support closing this weekend? And what is your stance for Labor Day? Just so we can get those opinions out there.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it. I want to hear everyone else. I'd like to hear your input.
Okay, well, I guess I'll be a little more forthright, and everybody can then pivot to my input. So here's the thing. We have had a constantly changing situation. And I agree with Debbie 100% when she's saying that we've had to talk to staff and we've pivoted and we've moved and we've adjusted. And I agree that staff has made all the right choices. And it's been a lot on all of our plates and a lot of conversation. So I'm appreciative of what we've done. I couldn't support more the fact that we closed our beaches last weekend. I think that was an absolute fantastic move. We personally hosted evacuees in our house. They were people that were displaced and they were able to make it to our house very quickly with the roads uncrowded. They stayed for days. When they left to go back to their house recently, they were able to make it back quickly and their home wasn't looted. And, you know, I've talked to many neighbors who have been in the same boat. We housed chickens over at a house. We housed cats. I mean, there was a full community effort going on with the people I'm associated with. And there was a lot of people doing what they could to help other people to make sure that, you know, the evacuation scene was happening in a way that kept people safe and secure. And I mean, it's a crazy thing. Next, I'm gonna go to a couple of things and I'll get into it. We absolutely needed to keep roadways open. That was essential. So last weekend, yes, was it perfect? Absolutely not even close. And we knew it going in. We knew the enforcement was going to be an issue. We kept the parking lot open. I agree with Kyle. I agree with, let me see who the other one was, Mr. Stockman. You know, we don't want to set that precedent up for a long time period. And the media campaign worked enough. And granted, still people came and we knew people would come. But the ability to keep people from parking in the neighborhoods was a huge win because that was a real mess for us. And the ability to have our police out doing and saving lives as opposed to patrolling the beach was what needed to happen. So that is what it is. Beefed up action to deal with beaches, I couldn't support more. And I'm going to agree and disagree with Deborah Penros. You know, she says, we don't have the resources. And I think I know what she meant by this because I agree with her. Currently, we do not have the resources, but I have been advocating, and I hope we get there. We do have resources. We have millions of dollars set aside still that from our emergency contingency funds. And from my perspective, those, and I've been asking Bob, to our city manager, to come back with some specific numbers on what it would take to have extra enforcement here on the weekends, which I think we need to deploy immediately, because back to what Debbie said, people are going to come. We need to make sure they have an enhanced experience while they're here. We need to take care of our locals while they're here. I think extra enforcement would go a long way to making that happen. We have funds to do it. Yes, they are not funds that we've allocated currently in our budget, but I think it's time to go into that. And I'm all for public safety and making sure that as we continue forward in what I consider an emergency situation, and that can be determined differently for every person, that we have more enforcement. We're making sure people are wearing masks, and people are coming. So we want to make sure that people are coming and visiting in a safe and practical way that's safe for all our citizens and also keeps traffic flowing to the best of our ability. So I'm interested in trying to find that to make that happen. Also, I just want to note, and I don't know when this was brought up, but in terms of figuring out a way to close the beaches more succinctly, it's a mess currently in Half Moon Bay. We oversee 2 beaches. You know, State Parks oversees a majority of the beaches. There's Peninsula Open Space Trust oversees a beach. Granada Sanitary District oversees beach. You know, the county oversees some beach. San Mateo Harbor oversees beach. Closing beaches is not just an on-off switch like it is in Pacifica. I am jealous that they have the ability to do it that way. We do not. And I've talked with Bob about this and getting a meeting with the new state parks person who was just appointed and their director to really start talking about this further to make sure that we have some continuing, the ability to work together to close things in unison, as opposed to one off, because we definitely need to make sure we've understood that there are holes that exist and we need to get through with that. So that's kind of my background, and I'll give you guys a little bit more. It's obviously not an easy issue. Even from the attendees tonight, we heard one side of an argument, we heard the opposite side of the argument. I am being inundated with both, and everybody's got their own rationale for why they think their particular side is right. And, you know, that's what we're here to discuss. So here's what I think. Last weekend, I thought we did a great thing keeping the roadways open because there was a lot less traffic, and it was not perfect. And I'm just proud of us for making that happen. For this weekend, and Robert was right, but I originally wanted, as long as the evacuation order was still in effect, it made sense from my perspective, but obviously it's the city manager's choice to keep the beaches closed and make sure that as people returned or when they returned, that the beaches were open enough for people to return all the livestock that's out there, all the different pieces of all the different neighbors that they've got to go get their stuff at in order to return to their houses. I wanted it to be easy because even the people staying with us had their belongings here, and then they also had belongings with people in El Granada. So just being able to go back and forth to pick that up and then go all the way back to your house in Lomomar is, you know, a major to-do when there's a lot of traffic out there. So I felt like that was important. But as soon as that restriction was lifted, personally, I wanted to change course and then keep the beaches open, because that was my main concern, was just the traffic issue with people going back to their houses in emergency situations. And so that has happened. That's why we're here tonight. I'm advocating strongly that we keep beaches wide open this weekend, no closing whatsoever. And I agree with Harvey, you know, in terms of we need to kind of match up with state parks as is. Last weekend, we tried to get them to match up with us and we weren't able to do so. And so the media campaign that we did worked. And I again, an imperfect situation that I think actually worked rather well in the scheme of things. And then for, in terms of the emergency declaration, I'm obviously all for it. Excuse me. We also opened up Smith Field. I don't know if you talked about that, Bob, but that, you know,
go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, just it's resources on us. It's the right thing to do. There was a bunch of people coming with trailers. They didn't know where to put them. We were able to pivot and get Smith Field open, which I'm super appreciative of. Cameron was able to help them with free showers and dumping of the waste. And you got garbage cans out there immediately. And it was an unbelievably amazing effort. And there's a bunch of, people volunteered quite a few items out there, which are still there in case people needed water or whatever it may be, extra food. And so that is another expense on our city. And so I'm very in support of trying to recoup some of those funds from an emergency declaration. That makes perfect sense to me. So I appreciate that. And as far as the weekend following Labor Day weekend, you know, based on the fact that we closed this past weekend, I would only be willing on closing for Labor Day if State Parks is also closing on Labor Day. And if they are leading that effort, and it, again, you know, almost back to what some of the attendees said, but if it's coming from the state level, if it's coming from people that are in the know, and have a little bit more authority to make those decisions, then obviously we're going to want to follow suit with that one as well. And if that is not the case, then I'm obviously okay keeping our beaches open. So that's kind of how I fall down on the issues. I don't believe there's anything else that you need direction on from me, and then we can go back to council and everybody else can do their direction.
I'm going to have to leave the meeting in just a few minutes.
Go ahead. Do you want to do it then?
We'll take the emergency declaration vote now.
Good. Let's do it. Can we do that? Is that okay for council?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, I would just say, I guess, like I said, there's two resolutions, and what I heard was that there seems to be consensus to overturn the executive order that was done 2 days ago. So in that case, maybe just allow Catherine, your city attorney, to explain that she has this alternative resolution ready to go if that's what the motion maker and if that's what the consensus is. Because it would be a three-part action, but it would include rescinding so that the beaches were open this weekend.
Okay. So does anybody want to make a motion, or do we need to go around the room another time beforehand?
Let's hear from Catherine.
I would just like to read into the record, because we only attached one resolution to the staff report, to make the motion to ratify the emergency proclamation, confirm the order closing beaches from last weekend, but then to not confirm and rescind the order closing beaches for this upcoming weekend. I just want to read into the record the resolution. which is very similar to, it's just a few changes. So the last recital of the resolution would now read, whereas in light of changed circumstances and improved containment, the closure of the city's beaches and parking areas from sunrise August 29th to sunrise August 31st to prevent the spread of COVID is no longer necessary to discourage travel to those beaches and to prevent unsafe crowding. And then the resolution number 9 would instead state the City Council does not confirm and hereby rescinds the August 26th, 2020 order directing the temporary closure of beaches and beach parking areas from sunrise August 29th to sunrise August 31st. So that would be the resolution. And then if you want to go ahead and make the motion, it is actually on the agenda. Let me just pull that up real quick.
Well, I mean, somebody can make the motion.
All right. You could, yeah, move the resolution as amended by the city attorney.
I move the resolution as amended by our city attorney.
Second.
Councilmember Penros?
Aye.
Councilmember Rohrback?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
You're on mute, Robert.
Yes.
It's Mayor Eisen?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Anything else we need to discuss? I think that wraps up the whole thing.
Well, I'd like to just make a comment, and that is to reiterate what Councilmember Ruddock said about city staff. These are not easy times. It is not easy for city staff to come to a decision when there are so many moving parts to it. And I commend Bob and everyone else that worked on this. Even the resolution to close beaches this weekend. I commend you for your efforts on that and for being so caring about our population, our city, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from your heart. And thank you for that.
Thank you. I agree. Well said, Deborah. Well said.
And thank you, Catherine, for the resolutions on the spot.
So what's left then to decide is, so I agree with what Adam said. If we were to close things down for Labor Day, we would want to guarantee that the state, because we're not going to get anything from our county medical officer.
No.
We already know that. And that was something that the state asked for in the past, and that isn't going to happen. So, however, we have been in communication with the state. Bob's been doing a great job in staying in contact with them. So we're not 100% sure where they're going to land. And it's kind of a, it's a little bit of a wishy-washy issue. We're going to open it up, everything for this weekend, and then we have to have an argument for why would we be closing it for Labor Day, right? So it's almost like every decision we make sets us up for these weird precedents, right? And we're not going to do these things perfectly. We're going to find out, well, what happened this weekend, right? Where it's sort of like we're testing things. We're going to keep everything open. We'll see what's going to happen. We want to get a sense of what the sheriffs, what does it mean for the sheriffs to, be doing things this weekend? We haven't even been definitive on that. Adam's right. We definitively did ask the sheriff, though, hey, what would be the plan if we decided to shut things down for Labor Day? What does it look like? How many resources do you need? And what's the cost? And so we know we've already made that ask, at least for Labor Day. So depending on what goes on this weekend, but that means we can't really make a decision about Labor Day. We only have 10 days, as Bob mentioned, to get things ready. So, so that's a little bit of the dilemma we're in right now. We're not making a decision tonight, right, about Labor Days. That's what I'm hearing.
Councilwoman Reddick, do you want to?
Yeah, Debbie.
I thought we were making a decision about Labor Day too, but
Okay, I wasn't sure, Adam, because you said we wanted to hear back from, you said if the state is willing to close all their beaches.
Yes.
And we get a commitment from the sheriffs to at least do what they did during July 4th, right?
Which I think we had already. So it's just, yeah, there's so much in motion there. We just have to see how it plays out from my perspective.
Yeah, but we want to ask and make, okay, so
Correct.
If all that.
If I could jump in, maybe this would be helpful. So Mr. Mayor, members of council. So Robert is getting to the dilemma here. So we did want direction on that tonight. And based on the comments that were made from both Councilmember Rarbeck and the mayor, and seems like some consensus there on wanting the state to be a part of it, I can say pretty confidently by Tuesday night, which is your meeting, we won't know that the state has agreed to do that. And it was our intention to have the council consider that issue on Tuesday. So it's what comes first. And so it's possible the state would come along, but we're not going to know by Tuesday. So then we're in a position where we either have to schedule another special meeting or I have to do an executive order. So if the council is comfortable with the direction tonight, we would either not bring anything on Tuesday if the direction was don't close. But if the council was the consensus was, let's be ready to close, then we would bring forward an order from the council to close for Labor Day on Tuesday. But like I said, we're probably not going to know from the state by Tuesday. So that's what I think Councilmember Brownstone was getting to.
Yeah, no, and can we get to the point where we're just the direction, and I'll be curious to know if this is it, but it's kind of or at least my perspective is if the state is going to close, we close, and if not, we're open, and we just kind of, at some point the state's going to have to make a decision.
Yeah, they have said they need I think it's 5 or 6 days. So if they haven't decided by Tuesday, I'm guessing Wednesdays they're drop dead.
Yeah, so go ahead, Debbie, sorry.
Yeah, so I would like to just make a suggestion that the city manager consider using his delegated authority, budget authority, to contract with somebody like Wildan or another private firm to do, to support the sheriff and ticketing cars. People hire them to do social distancing and mask enforcement, all that stuff. Use whatever delegated authorities you have to beef up our presence and response on Labor Day weekend. Don't worry about, having staff do overtime and, bringing them in from, outside places. It might just be easier to contract out, that work. And I would be totally supportive of that.
I would also be supportive of that. And I would also agree that the monies for it could come from our emergency reserves fund.
Yeah, that's what we mentioned earlier. Yeah, right. We're flush on the emergency reserves right now.
Yeah. Okay, Bob, do you need anything else from us?
I'd like to follow up on just two quick points that were raised, just to let you know what's going on both points. So a point was made, I think it was Councilmember Ruddick, about the longer term on beach access and our responsibility in that regard. Basically follow up to the meeting in July and then my update at the last meeting. We will provide, I'll have John Dowdy and Maz provide another update. It'll be brief, but we will provide another update under CM updates on what they're working on now. And they have started to work on the plan. Remember, we talked about a parking striping plan. They have started working on that. So I'll have them give an update at the next meeting so you can hear that. And then just a reminder on the general conversation about more enforcement and talking to the sheriff about that. We have set the next public safety subcommittee for September 11th, and it is our intention to have that conversation there. And so we'll be ready to have some figures about what extra resources from the sheriff and how we would go about amending their contract if that's the desire of the council. So I just wanted to remind that public safety committee, that is the purpose of that subcommittee.
Bob, the 8th or the 11th? I thought it was going to be the 8th.
I'm sorry. Jessica, can you help me out? What date did we set?
Jessica.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The public safety subcommittee.
September 8th. September 8th at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I have to
Very
go.
good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Debbie. Thanks on the short notice. Mr. City Manager, is there anything else that still needs to be discussed before we are ready to adjourn? Or council, does anybody else need to say anything before we go?
Just again to reiterate that thanks staff for being so ready to change things on a moment's notice and do the right thing in terms of doing the right thing. Thanks.
That's good. All right. Very good. Thank you all for coming tonight on the 8/28 special meeting. We are adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.